And welcome to Stories from the River. We are here live remote from the NASCAR Hall of Fame Museum Gear Shop. And I'm here with Mark Whitacre, fresh off the stage. We are covering the Purpose Summit. Mark, welcome to Stories from the River podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I see you're wearing a wire, something you got a little bit used to.
3 years I wore a wire.
Every day.
Monday through Friday for 3 years.
Mark, you've got a remarkable story.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
Well, why did you choose to be a speaker? Why did Coca-Cola Consolidated say, hey, we want to get involved with the Purpose Summit coming to Charlotte, North Carolina?
We've been hearing for years what they're doing in Indiana about the Purpose Summit and all the great work they're doing, the great speakers, the great audiences they would draw. And we said we had to be a part of it. So when we heard they're coming to Charlotte, where our corporate office is located, we became a sponsor. And then Davin heard me share at a prayer breakfast and asked me to speak at the event.
I was at that prayer breakfast, the one in Truist Field in
Truist
October.
baseball field.
Yeah, and so I've heard your story. I heard it again earlier this morning, and it gets me every single time. Now, for our audience, what they may not know is not everyone's life story has a movie made about it with Matt Damon.
My identical twin, I think you can see, obviously.
I clearly see the resemblance.
We got to meet him. My wife got to pour into his wife, and I think it had an impact on his wife watching our marriage when it survived.
You speak about brokenness. You speak about the faith of a wife to hold on to a marriage. Your wife visited you for 8.5 years, every Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday while you're in prison.
They did a book called Against All Odds in 2009.
Okay.
They added from the prison records how many 8-hour days my wife was in a prison visiting room, and it added up to 3 years and 8 months.
Oh my goodness. So what was the name of that book again?
Against Mark Whitacre, Against All Odds.
Mark Whitacre, Against All Odds. And you had another book that a gentleman introduced you to who came in. You had a couple folks come into your life, Ian Howes and Chuck Colson. And one of them gave you a book called, I think it was Surprised by Faith?
Yes, Chuck Colson.
Chuck Colson,
gave me that book. It was a famous scientist in Minnesota named Dr. Don Byerly, PhD biologist. I'm a PhD biochemist from Cornell. And all I heard at 8 years of university, God doesn't exist. If you believe in God, you can't be a scientist. So I started telling all my friends that my parents are Christians because they didn't go to college. They didn't know better. That's really where I was in my early 20s. And then Chuck showed several articles, several books, but the one that really grabbed my attention was a former atheist that was trying to prove that God did not exist, Don Byerly, PhD biologist, and he published a book, Surprised by Faith, that God exists and Jesus is the Son of God. So he became a Christian through that extensive research study.
It's funny how that works out. There was another book called Lord, Liar, or Lunatic that I had read. It was an atheist who was trying to prove that Jesus was either a lunatic, a liar, or he was who he said he was. He was Lord. So going back though, your career, you had a rapid ascent. You climbed the corporate ladder. You're a multi-billion-dollar company, 56 billion. You've got Lamborghinis, big houses. You're number 2 person at this company, and then you hear about a price fixing scheme. But you're like, hey, don't worry about that. Everybody's doing it. That's just the way we do business. And then what happened? Yeah,
I was so much hearing about it. Once I was a couple years there, divisional president of the company, number 4 executive at that point in 1989, corporate vice president of the whole company, besides being divisional president of the biotech division, and the CEO was 75 and the president was 71. So they needed this price fixing scheme that I did not know about at the time, was going on for well over a decade before I even joined the company. They were getting the age, they had to start pouring into some younger people how to do it. So after a couple years there, they said, Mark, you're like family, you're part of the family. We're going to start sharing with you some things that we do here in the company. And that's when they started sharing it. But with the stock options, bonuses, and I had my own Falcon 50, my own corporate jet. I just couldn't walk away. Wow.
And then your wife, Ginger, became a Christian. And then was being prayerful about her walk and said, she said, something's not right. Because you guys knew each other since grade school.
Yeah, since 7th grade and 8th grade. She was 7th grade and I was in 8th grade.
And she said, what's going on? And then you disclosed to her.
I did. And she turned me in. Literally, she forced me to turn myself in that day.
She said, well, I've been praying about it. And then how did you tell her? You said, well, let's talk about it. Let's think about it.
Oh, yeah. We not just talked about it. We argued about it for probably the biggest argument I've ever had in my life. I said, Ginger, you could be homeless. She said, you know what, I'd rather be homeless. I mean, I've got an 8-car garage full of 8 cars. I bought the CEO's home, 13,000 square feet, had a Ferrari, 2 BMWs, 2 Mercedes. She's driving a 10-year-old Jeep. And I said, Ginger, let me buy you a yellow Ferrari. I bought a red one last month. And she said, no, I want to be a good steward for God. I was like hearing Latin to hear that. It just, I mean, I couldn't understand it.
How old are you at the time?
I was 32, and at the time she was 31.
32, you'd been with the company for a couple of years or so?
Well, then I was 34 when I started wearing, when I started becoming when I started involved in the price fixing case, I was 34. They waited a couple years of the company and kind of part of the family. So I was 34 then.
Joined at 32, 34 when they kind of brought you
in the price fixing scheme.
And then your wife has this conversation with you that we're going to call the FBI. And how many kids do you have? And
3 young children. The youngest for sure took it more challenging. He was 6 at the time. Ginger and I tried for 8 years to have our own children. We adopted a 5-year-old and 7-year-old. She got pregnant 3 weeks later after we tried for 8 years. So we had a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, and a newborn in 1 year. So we had 3 children at that time.
And so then that day she said, no, we're going to call them. And so then the FBI comes over and you try to tell them, look over here, look at all this other stuff.
Oh yeah, I was doing everything. Said you got all these drug dealers in Decatur, all these things happening, so many more important things to talk to me, and they just wouldn't go. And then Ginger just kept telling them everything I told them. Told her that last couple hours.
And she wasn't going to let you off the hook.
No,
She's like, you're going to tell them the truth.
Yes.
We're coming clean.
Yes.
And they said, okay, we're going to reward you for you working with us. And for
they actually said that day, they said, we're either going to arrest you or you got to start wearing a wire tomorrow.
For 6 weeks.
Yes.
6 weeks turned into 156
3
weeks.
years. It became 3 years because it became multiple cases. Someone would brag on the tape, hey, we made $250 million doing price fixing on citric acid last week, and someone would talk about lactate. It became 11 different cases, 11 different products.
Corn syrup, citric acid, one like chain link from one to the next. So you had to continue the
3 years. I just wanted to quit talking about their illegal activity.
And then they bragged about the FBI will never catch us. Wasn't there a joke about that?
There was. In one of the meetings, they had the green lamp that had the video camera. I was, wired, catching the audio. And someone knocked on the door to bring in refreshments at the hotel. It was at the Atlanta airport there, 1993. And someone said, oh, yeah, put our hands out. We're going to get arrested. And then someone else said, yeah. We're going to get caught. And someone, the FBI is so stupid, they'd never catch something this sophisticated. And that was all on tape.
And they played that for the jurors.
They did.
Didn't take the jurors long to convict them.
Did not.
So then you had an opportunity for working with them for 3 years to get a plea agreement.
6 months. A Martha Stewart sentence. White collar camp, 6 months.
I mean, this sounds like, okay, my slap on the
Go
wrist.
in at 38, come out. By the time you wear a wire 3 years, now I'm 38.
Yeah.
So you go in at 38, come out at 38.
But you're like, no, I'm not having it.
Well, at first I thought about it. Then my wife said, please sign it. Let's put it behind us. And then I was so mad that I had to wear a wire 3 years because of her.
You're still
bitter. I
said,
Ginger, it's all your fault. I'm going to do the opposite you want me to do, Ginger. And I ripped it up. And
you weren't quite broken yet.
No, I wasn't. I was full of pride and full of myself.
So then, just to fast forward a little bit, you fight them. You spend millions of dollars. You fight them.
3 years I fought it.
And then for all that fighting to try to not go to prison for 6 months and tearing up the plea agreement.
Do 8.5 years.
You get a 10-year sentence.
Yes.
Which with good behavior at federal prison, you got to serve most of it.
Yeah, there's no parole in the federal.
8.5 years. But that was like maybe the best thing that ever happened to you.
Well, we didn't see it then as the best thing. I attempted suicide before I went to prison. I was at the end of myself for sure. But looking back now, I became a Christian my first year in prison. Chuck Colson reached out to me. A guy named Ian Howells from CBMC, Christian Businessmen Connection, reached out to me, discipled by 2 of the best. And it changed my life, especially Chuck Colson hit all the points about, Mark, here's some of the best scientists in the world believe in God. I needed to hear that, needed to see that. So looking back now, it's the best thing that ever happened.
It's funny how we can look back and see the dots connect in the rearview mirror, not when we're going through it.
Yeah, when I was
and so
in
you
the
talk
darkness.
about brokenness, and you're 41 years old when you truly got broken, and then you have to find purpose and what you're going to do for the next 8 years in prison, and you shared that story. And your wife had a funny quote: "Divorce isn't an option," because she was so faithful. We talked about that earlier. To come to visit you.
But she said murder was an option.
Divorce was an option, but murder is. That's a funny.
Especially the 6 month deal. She was really mad at the time, but looking back, she's glad I didn't sign it. But she was really upset.
I can imagine.
Especially when I blamed her, that it's all her fault.
And we can all go through. I mean, marriage is not easy. It's work. And you guys are coming up on your 45th anniversary.
We are.
That's amazing.
It's a miracle. Only God could do that.
Only
divorce rate in prison, 78%, and it's 99% divorce rate if you serve 5 years and longer. And I did 8.
Unbelievable.
Only God could do that.
Only God's story. And then you discovered all the scientific proof, Einstein and Sir Isaac Newton and
Francis Collins,
who said, no, there has to be a God. And some of these guys that Cornell kind of hid from you, didn't talk about. No, actually, they believe in God. They are Christians. And so in Coca-Cola's consolidated, the companies who you were stealing, your company was price fixing, would then go forward and take care of your family and take care of their education.
Several companies
You got closer to your kids while you were in prison.
And I worked for a company that I stole from 35 years ago. And I'm vice president of a company I stole from 35.
So
only God could do that.
You work for a biotech company. You go to work for CBMC. Sent to their COO, and then now you're with Coca-Cola Consolidated.
6 years now.
Yeah, and tell us the title and what you do.
Vice President of Culture and Care. Think of a publicly traded company with a culture and care department. That's a chaplain in every plant site, 104 plants, and prayer groups, dozens of prayer groups and Bible studies and discipleship program. And we're averaging 2023, 113 recommits and salvations a month of our employees.
Largest independent Coca-Cola bottling company in the world, in the country. And publicly held company. You're the vice president of culture and care, chaplains in every plant.
And stealing from 35 years ago.
Yeah. And then
now caring for them.
And now you guys are also sharing back out what you do through Transformation Factor, shortened to T Factor, and teaching companies. I think you guys are running a breakout session
1 to 4 o'clock today. We have an event today sharing with the world how we integrate faith to become a purpose-driven, faith-friendly company and the impact that's had on our corporation.
It's unbelievable. So, Mark, thank you so much for being at the Purpose Summit, for just being vulnerable, for sharing your story. It's truly a God story, and it's inspired so many people, and it continues to inspire people. Thank you for living through, being faithful and living in purpose, and congratulations to you and Ginger on 45 years of marriage and a beautiful family. And all that you've gone through.
And we're so honored to be at the Purpose Summit, and we can't wait till next year and be a part of it again.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. That is the Mark Whitacre story here from the Purpose Summit at Stories from the River. Thank you so much for joining us. Try to bring you fresh new content every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.